If you're a beginner in Python and you're looking for some simple projects to help you practice your skills, then you've come to the right place. In this video, I'll be walking you through 3 unique Python projects that will show you how to take some of the theory that you've learned and apply it into a real-world application. Not only will I walk you through everything line by line, but I'll explain my thought process and how I've designed the software so you understand how you could do this on your own, and I'll even provide some mini challenges to you so you can try to code something by yourself before looking at my solution. This is great for those of you that just want to spend maybe an hour or two writing out some Python code. You don't want it to be too intense, but you want to learn how you can actually do something by yourself and how to take that theory and apply that into a real world project. Now, these 3 projects are ones that I actually built when I was learning Python, so I know they're great for beginners and those of you that have learned things like if statements, for loops, variables, but are struggling to get to that next step. So with that said, we'll get into the 3 projects, but let me tell you what they are. There'll be timestamps down below in case you want to skip forward to a different project. So the first project we're going to work on is a trivia game. This will randomly select a certain number of questions, ask the user that, and then keep track of their score. The next project we'll build is a random password generator, where we'll generate a password based on the user's preferences, like if it should have uppercase characters, special characters, and numbers, and the length of the password. Lastly, we will then go to build a to-do list manager, so something that will save a to-do list for the user on their computer permanently. We can then mark items completed or uncompleted. You'll see how it works, but this is interesting to see how to work with files in Python. So those are the 3 projects, and you're going to learn a lot in each, but if you want some more challenges that are a little bit shorter and you want to really practice your Python skills further, then consider checking out my free newsletter. This newsletter sends out tons of emails that contain all kinds of practice questions, particularly in Python, as well as sample project ideas, tips and advice from myself. And to make it even sweeter for you, I've prepared an entire guide on all of the ways that you can make money from coding, and I'll give that to you for free if you sign up for the newsletter. Simply sign up from the link below. I'll email it to you, and then you'll be subscribed and you'll get all of those free challenges. Again, everything's completely free. You don't need to pay for anything. Just sign up from the link below. With that said, let's get into project number 1. So let's begin here with the first project, which is a trivia game. Now for this game, I want to have a set of questions, and obviously for all of those questions, we need some type of answer. The idea is that we want to randomly pick a bunch of these questions, so it's not always the same every time you run the program. We'll give those to the user, and then we'll see how many of them they get correct. So before I even start coding any of this out, the first thing I like to do is come up with a little bit of a plan. So I'd ask you, before you even listen to what I'm about to say, think about the different components that we'd have to this application. Now it's relatively simple. There'll just be maybe 3 or 4, but what are the steps we need to take? You can pause the video and try to figure it out on your own. Okay, so for me, when I first start thinking about this, I think that we need a list of questions, right? First thing we need to do is come up with some kind of questions, and then we need to store the answers to those questions and have them associated. Now, after we have the questions, we need to randomly pick some because we don't want it to be always the same. So randomly pick questions. We then need to ask those to the user. So ask the questions. We need to see if they are correct. We need to keep track of the score and then tell the user their score. Okay, so I'm just going quickly here because this is relatively simple, but the idea is that I've just at least thought about what I'm going to do here. I've written a little bit of a plan, right? So I kind of have some steps on the things that I need to do. And now when I start coding, I'm not completely lost, and I at least know where to begin. I might not know how to solve all of these yet, but I've kind of broken it into some smaller sub-problems here that are a bit easier for me to tackle. So first things first, let's get a list of questions. Now I'm just going to copy these in because I don't want it to take too long for me to type them out, and I'll explain why I've gone with this format. So what I'm actually using here is something called a dictionary. Now a dictionary in Python is a key value store. It allows you to have some kind of key. In this case, the key is my question, and the value is the answer. So the reason I'm doing this is so that I can very quickly look up what the answer is to a particular question. If you've never seen a dictionary before, the way that it works is you can do something like questions, and then in square brackets key is equal to some kind of value, and this would then set this key value pair, right? So in our case, all of the keys are the questions, and all of the values are the answer. So if I want to see what a particular answer is, then I simply just reference questions at key like this, and this would give me whatever the answer is. So for example, if I had this question and I pasted this here in the key, and I just looked at it and just printed it out, then it would actually give me 3 because that's the value associated with this key. So hopefully that makes sense, but I'm just using the dictionary kind of as a teaching opportunity, and because again, it allows me to look up what the answer to any of the questions are very quickly without having to use all kinds of messy lists. Okay, so now we have all of our questions, and the next thing I need to do is store the answers. Okay, so I've done that. So I have the list of questions and I have the answers. Now I need to randomly pick the questions. So in order to randomly pick the questions, we're gonna need to do some kind of random generation. So I'm gonna bring in here the random module. Now you may not have seen this before, but this is something that can generate random numbers for you and just generally do a lot of random operations. So I'm gonna import that at the top of my program. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna define a function, and this function is where most of the code for my game is going to live so that I could run the function again if I wanted to continually run the game multiple times. So I'm gonna make a function, and I'm gonna call this Python trivia game. And if you've not seen a function before, essentially this is a reusable block of code. So what I can do is just print something like hello. And now that I've defined this function, so you define a function using this def keyword, you write the name of the function, and then you put a set of parentheses, you put a colon, and then anything indented is kind of belongs to this function, and it can be reused multiple times. The way you use the function is you simply call it. So I can just write the name of the function. So that's what I'm doing, Python trivia game. And then I call it using a set of parentheses, and then it will just execute anything that's inside of it. So if I go here and I run my code, so just go Python project1.py, you can see that I have hello and hello. And obviously I should mention, in order for this tutorial to work, you do need Python installed. And I imagine that you would have created a file to put this code inside of. Okay, so we have this function. We can kind of start running it by calling it down here. And now obviously inside of the function, we're gonna move on to the next step, which is gonna be to randomly pick the questions. So in order for me to randomly pick the questions, what I can do is the following. Well, first, I'm just gonna get a list of what these questions actually are. So I'm gonna say questions is equal to, and we'll actually say questions list is equal to, and I'm just gonna say a list of, and then this is gonna be questions.keys. Now, when you're dealing with a dictionary, what you can do if you just want to get all of the keys is you can use .keys. If you wanted to get all of the values, you can use .values. Okay, so I'm just getting all of my keys. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly select a certain number of these keys. So I'm going to make a variable, and I'm going to say total questions is equal to, let's say, 5. It's the number of questions that I want to select. And while we're at it, we'll make another variable called score, and we'll just set that to 0 because later on we're going to keep track of the score. So now that I know the total number of questions and I have a list of all of my questions, I can randomly select them. So I'm going to make a variable called selected underscore questions, and this is going to be equal to random.sample. I'll discuss this in 1 second. And we're going to pass our question list and the total questions. And you can read this if I highlight over it, is it chooses k unique random elements from a population sequence. All that means is that it can take in something like a list, so that's what we passed, and it will just select k values that are unique from that list. So that's all that we want. We have our list of questions, and we want to select 5 of those, so random.sample will just take 5 of them and then give it to us in a list. So before we go any further, let's just print out what these selected questions are and just make sure this part of the code is working before we go any further. So let's go up here and let's run our code. So we're going to say Python project1.py, and you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Okay, so now that we have these questions, we need to ask them. So what I'm going to do naturally is I'm going to loop through these questions using a for loop. A for loop is something that will repeat a certain number of times. In this case, we want to loop over our list. So to loop over our list, there's a few different ways that we can do this. But what I want to do is I want to have access to the index inside of our list. Index is like the position of the elements, index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3. And I want to have access to what the question actually is. So I'm going to use something you may not have seen before, which is called enumerate. Bear with me, I'll explain it in 1 second. But I'm going to say for IDX, standing for index, comma question in enumerate, and I'm going to enumerate the selected questions. Okay, now what this is going to do is it's simply going to loop through all of the questions, and it's going to give me the position or the index of each question and what the question value is. So if we have a list like this, let's just say, like 1, actually let's go A, B, C, then 0 is the index for value A, 1 is the index for value B, and 2 is the index for value C. So what enumerate will do is it will give us the index as well as the value. So if we were enumerating over this list, A, B, C, then we would get 0 for the index and A for the question. Then we would get 1 for the index and then B for the question. So since we're doing that over selected questions, then we'll get the index and we'll get whatever the questions are that are contained inside of that list. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so now we want to ask the question. So in order to ask the question, I want to print out what the number of the question is and then ask it. So to do that, I'm just going to do a print statement, and I'm going to use something called an F string. Now an F string is simply a string that allows you to embed variables inside of it. So I can put F, and then I can put a string. This can be an uppercase F, by the way, or lowercase f, doesn't matter. And then inside of here, anytime I want to print out the value of a variable, I can just put it inside of a set of curly braces. So if I want to print out the question number, I can do something like idx plus 1 and then dot. Now what this is going to do is take my index, simply add 1 to it. So it means if it's 0, it will become 1. If it's 1, it will become 2. And then I'm going to put a dot. And then after this, I'm just going to print out whatever the question is. Now the reason why I'm adding the plus 1 is because we're going to start iterating at index 0, and I don't want to say question 0. I just want to start by saying question 1. So that's why I'm adding the plus 1. And then we can say whatever the question is, and then we can ask the user for their answer. But for now, we're just going to start with that, and I just want to see if that works. So let's scroll up here, and let's run our code again. And you can see that it now prints out all of the different questions. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great, so we're making good progress. We've now printed out all of the questions. We're effectively asking them to the user. And now what we need to do is ask the user to give us their answer. So I'm going to make a variable called user_answer. And notice for all of my variables here that I'm trying to give them a meaningful name, something that makes sense and that even if someone didn't know how to code, they'd be able to read. So whenever you're writing your program, you want to just try to make sure everything reads like English. In this case, we're defining that we have a Python trivia game. We're getting the list of questions. Here's the total number of questions we have. Here are the ones that are selected. Even if you didn't know how to code, you can still kind of understand what's going on here because you can read the variable names. So just a tip, and just really get in the habit of doing that early, but it's going to help you a lot later on in your coding journey. All right, so for the user answer, we're going to use input. Input allows the user to start typing something in the terminal. And all we're going to do is just say your answer, like this with a colon, and then I'm going to add a space. Now the reason I add a space is because I want to add some separation from the colon so that when the user starts typing, they're not squished with the colon. They have a little bit of space, right? So they can start typing after that, because that's how input works. After you put this is when the user can start typing on the same line. So we just add a space, so there's a little bit of separation. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to convert whatever the user types in to dot lowercase. So by default, whatever the user types will be given to us as a string data type in Python, and we'll just convert it to lowercase to make sure that if they accidentally type something in uppercase, we don't tell them it's wrong when we compare that to our answers. And notice all of our answers are all in lowercase, right? So we just convert what they type to lowercase. We're also going to add this dot strip. Now what dot strip is going to do is it's going to remove any of the spaces from the beginning or the end of the string. So if the user accidentally typed something like, space 8, we don't want to tell them that they're incorrect if the answer is actually 8. So we just remove that space so that when we're comparing it to the answer, we get the same thing. Hopefully that makes sense, but strip is a good thing to kind of use on the user input. All right, so that's going to ask the user for their answer. And we can quickly test that and just make sure that works. So let's go up here and let's run our code and ask us for the answer. And we can just type some stuff in here and make sure that's working. Okay, perfect. Very good. So let's close that and let's continue. So now that we're able to get the user answer, we want to compare that to whatever the answer actually is. So I need to get that answer first. So I'm going to say the correct_answer is equal to, and then this is going to be the questions. So we have it called questions up here. And then we're going to grab the question. So we have our question, right? That's one of the keys in our questions dictionary. So we look in questions, we use the question as the key, and then that will give us whatever the answer is associated with that. So now we have questions associated with question. Okay, perfect. That'll give us what the correct answer is. And now we can compare the user's answer to the correct answer. So to do that, we can use a simple if statement, and we can say if the user answer is double equal to, this is how you check if something is the same, the correct answer, and we'll just convert the correct answer to dot lowercase here, just to again ensure that everything's all in lowercase so we're not comparing cases. And then if they got this correct, which this statement would tell us they did, we can print out correct. And then we're just going to print a \n character. Now this \n character will simply move us down to the next line in the terminal, so we get a bit of spacing between the next question that we ask. Now, as well as telling them that they got it correct, we can increment the score. So we can say score plus equals 1. So we have score variable, and if they got something correct, well, they got a correct answer, so we'll just add 1 to this. That's how you can add 1 to a variable, right? Just score plus equals 1. Okay, perfect. Now, otherwise, if they didn't get this correct, we need to tell them that they got it wrong. So we're going to do a simple print statement. We're going to make this an F string, and we're going to say wrong. And then we will say the correct answer is, and then inside a set of braces here, we're going to say correct answer. So we're just going to tell them what the answer is so they actually know that. Then I will put a period, and I will add a \n character here again, just so that we go down to the next line so we have some spacing between the next question. Okay, I know we wrote a good amount of code there. Just to quickly recap, we get the user's answer. We then get whatever the correct answer is. We then compare these, so we check, are these things the same? If they are the same, then that means they got it correct. So we say correct, and we add 1 to the score. Otherwise, we tell them that they got it wrong, and then we tell them what the correct answer was so that they know. So let's try this code before we go any further. We're actually almost finished, by the way. And let's start answering this. So how do you start a for loop in Python? For, correct. What is the keyword to define a function in Python? Let's just get it wrong. Let's go F, and it says wrong. The correct answer is def. What data type is used to store true or false values? Bool. Wrong, the answer is Boolean. Okay, so maybe we want to change that one, but that's fine. And what is 10 over 3? 3. Okay, perfect. And let's do this one. Input. There we go. All right, so that kind of completes the trivia game. However, we want to, if we go here, tell the user what their score was and keep track of the score. So that's kind of the next step here. We need to tell them what the score actually was. So let's go down here and let's start by just printing something out and telling them what their score was. So we're going to make an F string and we're going to say game over. And we'll say your final score is, and then we can say score over the total questions. So we're just telling them, like 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5, whatever it is. We just tell them how many questions they actually had. Okay, perfect. So that's fine. And then if I come here, let's give this a quick test and let's just answer these quickly. So what is the keyword to define a function? That's def. To import a module is import. What is the result? 3. This is 8, I believe. How do you start a for loop? Let's get one wrong. And it says your final score is 4 over 5. Fantastic. So there you go. That's pretty much it for this simple trivia game. Now, again, kind of the purpose of this was just to show you the thought process, how I created a little bit of a plan. I went through the plan step by step. Obviously, we skipped a few steps, but generally we kind of followed this, so we knew exactly where to start. And it was a lot easier for us to create this program because I knew kind of the steps that I wanted to follow, and I didn't have to stop constantly and keep thinking about what to do next. So generally, what to take away from here is when you are building out some kind of project, always start by just asking yourself, what do I actually need to do? How can I break this down into some smaller steps that are easier for me to solve, and then solve them one by one and kind of combine them together to ultimately come up with the end code. I'm sure some of this code might be a little bit confusing, especially if you are a complete beginner, but I wanted to not really focus on the theory and just get directly into the project so you can see exactly how to write this. If you want to analyze the code for yourself, I will leave it linked in the description, but now we're going to move over to the next project where we're going to build a random password generator. All right, so we're moving to project number 2, which is going to be our random password generator. Now, same thing as before, I want to begin by coming up with a basic plan. Now, my idea here is that I want to just generate a random password, but I want this to be based on the user's preferences. Now, we can come up with whatever preferences we want, but usually speaking, when you have a password, there's a few kind of sets of criteria that you need to fulfill. So for example, it may need to be a certain length. So we want to ask the user what length the password should be. It may have to contain special characters or uppercase characters or things like numbers. So for me right away, the first thing I want to start writing down is what I need from the user before I can continue, like the user input that I want to collect. So the first step in this project is collect user preferences. And those preferences are going to be the following. The length of the password should contain uppercase. Okay, should contain special or special characters, and should contain numbers or digits. Okay, so this is just what I came up with. You can change this to anything that you want, and I would actually encourage you to do that, to mess around with it a little bit. But you can see length should contain uppercase, special, and digits. That's the first thing we need to do, is we need to collect that from the user. Now after this, it becomes a little bit less clear what we need to do, but I'm going to walk you through my thought process. So if we want to randomly generate a password, we're going to need to randomly select characters out of the available characters that we could pick. What I mean by available characters is that if the user doesn't want any uppercase, special, or digits, then we just have the lowercase characters to pick from, right? And we need to randomly select them and add them into some type of string. But if they've selected all of these, or whatever kind of combination they have, that creates a pool of characters that we can then pick from. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to say create all available characters, or get all available characters, so we kind of know which ones we're able to use. Once we know all of the characters that we can use, then we can simply pick them one by one until we reach the desired length. So we're going to say randomly pick characters up to the length. However, the only thing that we're not really accounting for is that we want to make sure that when we do this random selection, that if the user specified to include digits, special, or uppercase, that we have at least one uppercase, one special, and one digit. If we just randomly pick out of all of the characters that we have available to us, it's possible that we don't get one of those characters. So we need to add kind of a caveat here and say, ensure we have at least one of each character type, right? Okay, so whatever they select. And now that also tells me, well, what if the user asks for a password of length 1 or length 2, but they say that we want uppercase, special, and digits? Well, that's not going to be possible, because if they only want 2 characters, then I can't, satisfy that constraint of having an uppercase character, a special character, and a digit. So I'm going to add another thing here, and I'm going to say ensure length is valid. So we're just going to make sure the length of the password matches whatever the criteria is that they've specified, so we can actually generate what they're asking for. Okay, now there's some other things that we probably need to do here, but generally speaking, this is a decent enough plan where I've now thought through what I need to do, and I can start coding this out. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to import 2 modules to begin. I'm going to import random, and I'm going to import string. Now you may not have seen the string module before, but this is something that will give us access to a list of all of the characters that are lowercase, uppercase, digits, or special characters. So it just saves us a little bit of time from having to, say, manually write all of them out ourselves. Okay, next we're going to create a function like we did before, and notice my naming, generate password, right? I'm just making it super clear what this function actually does. Now, the first thing we had on our list is we need to collect the user's preferences, like the length, and then if it should contain uppercase, special, or digits. So let's start writing that out. We're going to say the length is equal to, and we're going to have an input. And for the input, we'll say enter the desired password length, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do .strip just to remove any of the spaces. Now after that, I'm going to have a variable, and I'm going to call this include, and this is going to be uppercase, and we're going to have an input, and this is going to say include uppercase letters, question mark. And I'm just going to put inside a set of parentheses, yes or no. So we're telling the user what we expect them to type in. Then just like before, I'm going to strip this, and I'm going to convert it to .lower so that it's a lowercase, so when we compare what they typed in, we don't check for the case. Now we're just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it 2 times, because we're going to have the same thing again, except now rather than uppercase, we're going to have special, and we're going to have digits. Okay, so we're going to say include special, and I'm going to change this to characters. And then for digits, we're going to say include digits, and then yes or no. Okay, so now we've collected the input from the user, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to first convert this length to a number. So by default, when you type something in as input, the type of that variable is going to be a string. And I want my length to be a number because I need to have a numeric value so I can use it in Python and, for example, loop through it. If it's a string, it's just not in the correct type. So I'm just going to simply put an int function around this input.strip. Now what this does is it collects the user input, strips any of the spaces, and then converts it to an int. Now this is going to assume that we type in a valid integer. If you don't type in a valid integer, this will actually give you an error, but for our program now we're going to keep it simple and just assume that they're going to give us a valid number. If they don't, the program's going to crash. So for now, let's call the function and test this. I don't like to write too much code without testing. So let's do that. Let's go here, and then let's go Python, and then project2.py, and let's just go through these fields. So for, yes, no, no, and very good. Okay, now we're able to enter all of these values. Sweet. So now that we've done that, the next thing that I want to do is I just want to ensure the length is valid here. Now I'm just going to make this really simple, and I'm going to ensure that they give us a length that's at minimum 4. Because if they give us a length of 4, then we know no matter what they've asked us to do here, we can include a character of every single type. So I'm going to say if the length that they've given us is less than 4, then I'm going to print the password length must be at least 4 characters. And I'm simply going to return from the function. Now, when you return, you're just going to exit the function and go back to the line that called it, which means anything that I put down here will not run. So if this is true, we will simply return, which means anything beneath this line won't happen inside of the function. So just exiting out early. Okay, great. So now that we've done that, the next step is to get all of the available characters. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to show you. You probably haven't seen this before. I'm going to say lower is equal to string dot, and then this is going to be the ASCII lowercase. Now what ASCII lowercase will do is give me all of the lowercase letters. That's all it does. It's just going to give me a string that contains all of these lowercase letters. And if we want to print it out just to kind of test our sanity here, we can do that. So let's just go here and run the code. And oops, it says inval literal for int with base 10. That's what I was talking about. So let's actually, I need to fix this because now it's going to tell us that the password must be minimum 4. Okay, 5, and then go here, and you can see that it gives us all of the lowercase letters. Sorry about that mess there, guys, just because of the way that I was running the code. But the point is, lowercase or string.ascii lowercase gives us all of the lowercase letters, which is what we want. So next, we're going to get uppercase, and this is going to be string.ascii uppercase. However, we're only going to get this if the include uppercase. Otherwise, we're going to have an empty string. So pretty much what I'll say, and actually I need to adjust this, I'm going to say if include uppercase is equal to yes. So if this value is equal to yes, then we will get all of these. Otherwise, we will just have an empty string. Now you may not have seen this Python code before. That's intentional. I'm trying to make it a little bit more complex to hopefully teach you something. But this is known as an inline if statement or a ternary statement. Anyways, the name's not important. The point is, the thing on the left-hand side will be the value in this variable if this condition is true. Otherwise, it will be the thing after the else. So it'll either be an empty string or it will be all of the uppercase characters. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Now let's copy that, and we're going to do the same thing now, but for special. So I'm going to say special is equal to string dot, and then I believe that this is going to be punctuation if include special is yes. Okay, and then we can copy it one more time, and we're going to do digits. Okay, so we're going to say digits is equal to string dot, and did you guess it? Yes, you did. It's digits if include digits is equal to yes. So now that we've got all of the characters that we should be using, what we're going to do is combine them all into one large string. So I'm going to say all underscore characters is equal to, and then I'm just going to add all of these together. So I'm going to say lowercase plus uppercase plus special plus digits. This is known as a string concatenation, and it just squishes the strings together. So for example, if you had hello and you added world to this, right, then what you would get is hello world, right? It would just combine them together. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, but that's what we're doing here. And the reason why this will work is because if we're not including any of these, then it will just be an empty string. And when you add an empty string to another string, it just doesn't do anything. It just gives you the original string. So if we are including these, then we will combine them together. If we're not, then we'll just have an empty string. So when we do this addition, effectively nothing will happen for, the special, digits, uppercase, whichever one we don't actually have. So let's do another sanity check here, and let's just print the all characters, and let's make sure this works based on the parameters that we give it. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to go length 10. Let's include uppercase. Let's not include special, and let's include digits. And you can see that we get everything except the special characters. Let's run it again. Let's go 10. Let's not include uppercase, but let's include special and digits. And now you can see we get all of the special characters as well as the digits and of course the lowercase letters, which we always have. Okay, so now we've selected essentially the pool of characters that we're able to use. And the next thing we need to do is randomly pick characters up to the length, and we also need to ensure that we have at least one of each character type. Now, we can do this in different orders, but what I'm going to do is I'm first just going to select one character from each category that we need to have at least one of. So in order to ensure that we have at least one special character, one digit, or one uppercase letter, we're just going to start by selecting one of those characters if that's included. And then we'll have those be a part of our finished string, and whatever remaining characters we have left to pick, we'll randomly pick them. So the idea is, if you want to have an uppercase character, we'll start by randomly picking one uppercase character. Then we'll randomly pick, for example, a special character if you want to have that. We'll randomly pick a digit if you want to have that, and that will cover 3 characters of whatever the password length will be. So then we will just pick whatever the remaining number of characters are. So let's say the length is 10 and we've already picked 3. We'll then just pick 7 random characters from all characters and put those in the string. This will just ensure that we always have at least one of whatever the user asked for. Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to have this list called required characters, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add into this list all of the characters that we need to have, so they'll be at max 3. So I'm going to say if include, and let's go with uppercase here. So if include uppercase, and we're going to say this is equal to yes, then what I'm going to do is say required characters, and we're going to say dot append, and we're going to randomly select a character from the uppercase list, or from the uppercase characters. So to do that, we're going to say uppercase, and we need to now randomly pick one of the characters inside of here. Now there's different ways to do this. For example, we can use this random.choice. So I can say random.choice and then uppercase, and this will just randomly pick one character from uppercase. And in fact, that's exactly what we're going to do. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say if include special is equal to yes. Then we're going to say required characters dot append, and we're going to append random dot choice on special. And then you guessed it, we're going to do the same thing for digits. So if include digits is equal to yes, then we're going to say required characters dot append random dot choice, and then this will be the digits. So again, the idea is if we're including these, so special, digits, uppercase, then we're just going to randomly pick one character from just that list of uppercase, special, or digits. We're going to add that into required characters, and this will give us those characters that we need to have no matter what, and then we'll select the rest that we're going to have randomly. Okay, so in order to do this, we're now going to say that the remaining length, or the remaining number of characters that we need to generate, are going to be equal to the length minus the len of our required characters. So if we selected 3 required characters, then the remaining number of characters we need to pick is whatever the length of the password will be minus however many we've already picked. Okay, then we're going to say our current password is equal to the required characters, and we're going to start adding more characters into this password. All I'm doing is just kind of renaming this now. So I'm saying, okay, we've picked these required characters. These will be in our password that we're going to randomly generate. And now we're just going to start picking new random characters to add inside of this password. Notice that I'm doing this as a list. The reason why I'm using a list right now is because I can just keep appending values inside of it very easily. And then later I can take this list and I can convert it into a string. I can shuffle around the values inside of it. It's just a little bit more flexible if I'm going to keep randomly picking a bunch of new items. There's also a speed concern here. It's faster to add items into a list than it is to keep creating a new string. So it's kind of an efficiency concern as well, but I don't want to get into that too much in this video. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to loop through the remaining characters, the remaining length that I have, and just pick new characters. So I'm going to say for, I'm going to use underscore, which I'm going to explain in 1 second, in range, and then remaining length. Now what this is going to do is it's going to have this for loop running however many characters left there are to pick. So if the remaining length is 7, then this for loop is going to run 7 times. Now the underscore is simply a placeholder variable when you don't want to define something. So typically I would do something like for idx in range remaining length, and then idx would be equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it would count up to whatever this value is, but not include it. but I'm not going to use this variable. I don't care what the index actually is. I just want this for loop to run 7 times, or remaining length times. So I can just use an underscore so that I don't have this variable defined for no reason. And it acts like a placeholder. That's really all it is. It's known as an anonymous variable. So now that I have that here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly pick a value from my characters. So I'm going to say my character is equal to random dot choice, and I'm going to pick something from my all characters. So all of the characters that are valid to choose from, I'm just going to pick one, and then I'm simply going to add that to my password. So I'm going to say password dot append the character. Okay, so that now is going to give me a character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print the password so that we can see what this looks like before we convert it into a string. Okay, so let me run the code quickly. I'm going to say, let's go 10. Let's include everything. Okay, and you can see that this is the password that was generated. Now notice that we have an uppercase letter, we have a special, and we have a digit, and it comes in this order. The reason why is because we started by creating or selecting those 3 required characters. Then we just picked random characters, so we got whatever was randomly selected. So that's fine, but I want to now shuffle this up and make it even more random, because I don't want the 3 characters that I selected to always be at the beginning of the list or the beginning of the password. So what I'm going to do is have another randomization where I'm going to say random.shuffle my password. Now what random.shuffle is going to do is it's going to look at this list and just going to randomly mix up all of the items that are inside of it. That's it. Just going to mix them all up. Okay, so now that it's done that, what I can do again is I can print out the password. Keep in mind, it's still a list. It's not yet a string, so we'll convert it to that in 1 second. And let's just have a look. So let's make this, for example, length 4. Let's go yes, yes, and yes. And there you go. We get our slash backtick 4D, okay? And if we ran this again and did the same thing, we would get a different result. So now I just want to convert this to a string. So in order to convert it to a string, I can say my string underscore password is equal to, and the easiest way to do this is to do a empty string dot join and then our password. Okay, now the way that this works is dot join will take a list. In this case, we have a list of different characters, and it will combine all of the elements in that list together using whatever this string is as a separator. Now, in this case, we have an empty string, which just means combine all of the values in a list to a string. But if we did something like a pipe, then it would combine all of them with a pipe in between every single character, or a comma in between every single character. It's a very useful method to know in Python. So what we'll do is we'll simply return the string password. And then what we're going to do down here is we're going to say password is equal to generate password. And we're just going to print out what the randomly generated password was. Okay, so that's the code. Let's test this, and then we can kind of go through it and just review what we've written. So we're going to enter the length. Let's make it like 25. Let's just go yes, yes, or I guess that's not going to include now, so we'll say yes. And then there we go. We get our password. Let's test it again. Let's go maybe 10. Let's go yes, no, no, and there we go, we get our password. Okay, so you can mess around with this and you can keep getting a bunch of random passwords, but that is this project. To quickly recap, right, we had to start by collecting all of the user values or all of the user preferences, make sure the length is valid, and then we get all of the characters that we can possibly use. Then we generate all of the required characters that we need to have in this password. We then get the remaining length after we've generated those, and then we start generating the password by just randomly selecting characters from all of the valid ones that we can pick. Then we shuffle up whatever we've selected, we convert it to a string, and we return it back to the user. When we return something from a function, it simply gives it back to wherever the function was called. So string password now gets returned to this and gets stored in this password variable, and then we can print out the password. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed. That was project 2. Let's move on to the next one. So we are moving on to project number 3, which is going to be a to-do list management app. Now, my idea behind this is I want to store to-do list items for a user like on the system, like in a permanent area where if the user runs the application again, they can still see those same items. So yes, you probably wouldn't use this in the real world, but I'm just showing you something so you can understand how to work with files and various different data types and kind of load information, save information, so you can use it when the program has finished running. Anyways, the idea is we're going to have some kind of to-do list items, like to-do list item 1, and then we can mark it complete or incomplete. then we want to be able to save it to the disk and then load it from the disk. So let's start writing some of these features so we have a little bit of a plan. Now, first things first, we're going to have to load existing data, right? Like when we run the program, load existing items. Okay, then we're going to have a few different operations we should be able to perform. Now, the first operation might be creating a new item. Then maybe we want the ability to list items to see which ones already exist. And we probably want the ability to maybe mark item as complete. Okay, and then lastly, we probably need to be able to save items, right? So I'm not coming up with a full detailed plan, but I'm at least thinking of some of the different operations that I'm going to need to perform so I can start kind of stubbing out the program and just understanding what it is that I'm about to do. Okay, so we have create, list, mark, and save. Now what I want to do is I just want to write some of the functions that we'll have in order to kind of perform these operations. So the way that I start a larger program like this is I begin by just writing out the core operations. I don't implement them, so I don't write all of the code and make it work, but I just write kind of the name of the different functions, and I start just mapping the program out a little bit so visually I know what's going on. So like we said, we need to load existing items. So I'm going to make a function called load tasks. Okay, now I'm just going to say pass. When I say pass, this just means this function is empty right now, and I'll come back to it later. Now next, we're going to have save tasks. Okay, we'll say pass, and then we're going to have a few more, right? So we'll have view tasks. Okay, we're going to have create task. So create underscore task. And then we're going to have define mark task complete. Okay, perfect. So those are kind of the 5 main things that I'm going to need to be able to do. And then I'm going to have one function, and I'm going to call this main. The main function is typically the entry point to your code, like the first thing that you start running. And in this main function, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of connect some of these functions together. So I'm going to have the user type in maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the type of operation they want to perform. And then I'll call these different functions. You'll see what I mean, but hopefully this is making a little bit of sense already in terms of the different things that we're going to need to do. And we'll talk about saving it to a file and all of that kind of stuff. So for now, inside of my main function, I'm going to start by just loading my tasks. So even though I don't have this written yet, I'm going to say tasks is equal to load tasks. So you can see that I'm kind of mapping out the program on what I want to happen. And then later on, I'll go and I'll implement all of these functions. So we're going to load the tasks. That's the first thing that we need to do. And then I'm going to set up a loop. And in this loop, I'm going to continually ask the user what I want them to do. So I'm going to say while true. We're going to use a while loop. This means we're just going to keep running until we eventually decide to break out of the loop. And then here, I'm going to have a print statement, and I'm just going to do a \n, and I'm going to say to do list manager. So I'm just kind of telling them what the application is. Then I'm going to print out the different operations that they'd be able to perform. So I'm going to say 1 is view tasks. I'm going to say print 2 is maybe add task. Okay, print, and then this is going to be 3. This will be complete task. Okay, and then print, let's do this, 4, exit. Okay, so these are the main things that they'll be able to do. Then I'm going to ask the user what they want to do. So I'm going to say choice is equal to input. And I'm going to say enter your choice. And then I'm just going to strip this. Okay, so we're going to go dot strip just to remove any of the spaces. And then I'm going to see what they typed in. So essentially what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say if they typed 1, then we're going to view the tasks. If they typed 2, then I'm going to, where is this? Create the task or add the task. If they typed 3, then I'm going to mark the task as complete. And I'm just kind of mapping this up, right? And connecting the different functions together so that the flow is there. And then we can go and implement them one by one. So I'm going to say if choice is equal to 1, then what I want to do is say view tasks, right? Okay. Now I'm going to say elif choice is equal to 2. And the way that the elif works is if this is not true, then we will go to check this condition. So we're going to say elif choice is equal to 2. Then we're going to say add task. Okay. Or what do we call it? We called it create task. Then we're going to say elif choice is equal to 3. Then we're going to mark task complete. And then we're going to say elif choice is equal to 4. Then we're going to print goodbye. And we are simply going to break. And when we break, that's going to exit this loop, which will then end the program. And then lastly, we'll have an else. And we'll say print invalid choice. Please try again. Okay, so if elif, else. So if this is not the case, we check this. If it's not the case, we check this. If it's not the case, we check this. And if none of these were the case, then we go into the else. Okay, and that's pretty much it. And then what we can do is we can call the main function. So again, I know I keep repeating this, but what I've done is I've just mapped this out. I've connected the different functions. I now have an idea of what it is that I need to do. And really all that's left is to write these individual functions. And it's significantly easier for me to think about these one at a time than it is for me to try to write them all at the very beginning. So let's just run the code for right now and see if this works. We're going to see nothing really is going to be happening. But if I run project 3.py, you'll see that it prints out to-do list manager, view task, add task, etc. If I type 5, I get invalid choice. If I type 1, then it just goes to the next thing, right? 3, and then 4, and then I exit. Okay, so just testing that. So far, this is working. Obviously, we can make it look prettier if we want. All right, so that is great. We now have the options and kind of like what we're able to do. And the next step is to start writing these out. So let's begin by worrying about how we're going to load the tasks in and how we're going to save them into a file. Now, I'm just going to remove this for right now because we don't really need the plan anymore. I'm going to import a module called JSON. Now, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and you can create JSON files that can store data that looks very similar to a Python dictionary. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a Python dictionary. We're going to have tasks, and then in this tasks list, there'll be a list here. We're going to have all of the individual tasks. Select task. The task is this. And then we're going to have a variable that tells us if the task is completed or not. So the idea is we can store this in a JSON file because what we've written here is what's known as JavaScript Object Notation. Again, something very similar to what a Python dictionary looks like. And then we can just store this file. We can update if this is completed or not completed. We can add additional tasks to the list. We could remove tasks if we want, and we'll just store that in a file. We'll load it in, we'll modify the tasks, and then we'll override the file or save the new changes to the file after. Just bear with me as I write out the code and you'll understand how it works. So first things first, I'm going to say my file underscore name is equal to, and we're just going to call this to-do underscore list.json. Okay, now we can just manually make a JSON file just so you can kind of see how this works to begin. So I'm going to make a new file in my editor, and I'm going to make sure this file is in the same directory where my Python code is. So where my project 3 file is where I'm going to make this file. And I'm going to call it to-do underscore list.json. Now, if you're working in VS Code, you'll see that it gives you kind of the braces here indicating that this is JSON. And what we need to do is we need to write what looks like a Python dictionary. So these open braces, we need to specify a key. In this case, the key that I'm going to use is just going to be called tasks. And then we can just have a simple empty list. So for right now, we have no tasks. So we just say tasks is equal to an empty list. Okay, this is our JSON file. Now, what I'm going to show you how to do is how to load in this JSON file and then how to save content to the JSON file. So the way it works is we can go in load tasks and we can write the following. We can say with open. We're going to specify the name of the file, which is our file name. And we're going to specify the mode we want to open this in. Now, R is the mode for reading. So if we want to read the file and not modify it, we open it in R mode, which is what we're doing right here. Okay, then we say as file, and all we're going to do is return json.load and then file. Okay, now what this does is it opens the file for us, creates this file object, and then we use this JSON module to load the file as a Python dictionary. So what's going to be returned to us is simply a Python dictionary that looks exactly like this. That's it. That's all we get. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to add a little bit of error handling here because it's possible the file may not be found. So we're going to say try, and then we're going to put all of this inside of here, and we're going to say accept. And for the accept, we are simply going to return an empty list. The reason we're doing this is if some kind of error occurs while we attempt to do this, like loading the file, then we'll just return an empty list indicating that, hey, we don't have any tasks. And actually, rather than doing that, we're just going to return exactly what it would look like. So we're going to say tasks like this, because that's what's going to be returned from our JSON. So we want to make sure we return a object that's in the same format as this one. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Again, we're trying to open the file. We load the JSON using json.load. It just gives us the Python dictionary version of this file. And then if something goes wrong with this, we're just going to return an empty list of tasks. Perfect. So for now, let's just try to call this function. So we have tasks equal to load tasks, and let's just print what the tasks are. And just for sanity, I'm just going to add inside of here a random string that just says hello world, so we can see if we get that. Okay, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to run, and notice it tells me we have tasks hello world. If I change this and I add another task, and let me just get out of this and run again, you see that now we get the other task. So we're loading from this file into our Python script. Great, so that's how we load. Now that we've loaded, what we want to do is learn how to save. So in order to save our tasks, we're going to take as a parameter to this function the tasks that we want to save. Now this is just a variable that we can pass to the function, and then the function can use this to, well, save the tasks. So in order to save this, we're going to do a very similar thing to what we did when we were loading, and we're going to just copy all of this, and we're going to change the width. So we're going to say width, open file name. This time we're going to open this in W mode. Now W mode stands for write mode, and this will override an existing file. So if this file already exists, it's essentially going to delete it and then recreate it and write inside of it whatever we tell it to write. So rather than returning json.load, we're going to say json.dump, and we're going to dump the tasks into the file. Okay, so what json.dump does is it takes our Python dictionary and it just writes it into the file. That's it. That's all that's happening. Very straightforward. And then for our accept, we're just going to have a print here, and we're going to say failed to save. So if, again, some error occurred here, then we'll just say that we failed to save the tasks. So just, again, for a sanity check, let's check and see if this works. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to go down here, and before I load the tasks, I'm just going to save some. So I'm going to say save tasks, and let's just load this, and we'll say saved task. Okay, so we're passing in what we want to save, which is a valid Python dictionary, and then we should load it, and then we can print it out, and we can see if it works. Okay, so let's try this. I'm going to go to 4, and then let me just clear this and rerun. And you can see that it shows us the saved task, which is what we just added. And if we look at the file, we now have our saved task, which is what we saved from this line right here. Okay, let me get out of this. All right, so now we know how to save and how to load our various tasks. So now we can get rid of this and we'll just load them in. And the next thing that we need to do is have the ability to view our tasks, and also actually let's create one first. Before we can view them, we should be able to create them. So for our create task, we're actually going to take in the tasks that exist. And the reason for that is that we're going to add to these tasks the task that we just made. So you'll see how this works in 1 second, but we're going to say create task, and we're going to first get the description of the task. So let's say description is equal to input, and we'll say enter the task description like that, okay? And then same thing, we'll just strip out any of the leading or trailing white spaces. Now we're just gonna make sure that they did give us a description. So we're gonna say if they did give us something, so if we have some kind of description, that's what this is checking. Then we're gonna say tasks dot append. However, this really is gonna be tasks and then tasks dot append, and I'll explain why we're doing that in 1 second. And we're gonna append to this a description, and the description will be this. And we're going to say complete, and by default, this will be false. Okay. Now what I'm doing is I'm saying, all right, we're going to pass our tasks. Now the task is going to be a dictionary that looks like this. We're going to have tasks and then a list of all of the tasks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the tasks list from this key, and that's going to give me this. And then I'm going to append to that list this new task. So I'm just adding it inside of here. Then once I do that, since I've now updated my tasks, I can save them. So I'm going to say save tasks and then tasks. Okay, so we pass it there and then automatically saves it in the file for us. And then we can just have a simple message, and we can print and say task added. Perfect. Then we'll have an else statement, and we'll say else description cannot be empty. Okay, perfect. Now, one thing to note here is that when we pass this dictionary to this function, we're actually able to modify the dictionary, and any changes that are made inside of this function will exist outside of the function. So later on, when we start passing tasks to these various functions, any update that we've made will be existing inside of this main function as well. Now, this has to do with a property of dictionaries in Python known as mutability, which means they can be modified once they've been created. I don't want to talk too much about it because it's a whole another video and a long explanation, but essentially what you need to know is that dictionaries are mutable. So if you pass them between different functions, which is what we're doing here, any changes that you make to them will apply outside of the function as well. Essentially to the object, no matter where it was passed, any of those changes will exist on it. So here, when I add this new task to it, I don't need to return this back to the function. It will just automatically be updated for me. So the next time I use it in this function, it will have those changes applied. All right, hopefully that makes sense, but this now gives us the ability to create a new task. What I need to do though is go to my create task function, and I need to pass this tasks variable to it because it requires this parameter. We need to pass that. So we pass it to the function. We ask for the description. If they did give us a description, we then add this new task. We save it, and then we say task added. Otherwise, we just say that it cannot be empty. So let me just remove what I have for right now inside of the task. So it's an empty list, and let's try to create a new task. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to go to add task. Now it says enter the task description, and we're going to go item list 1. Okay, then it says task added. Now to check if that works, we can simply go here, and you can see that now we have this new task where we have the description, and we have if it's completed or not. Perfect. Okay, so now that we've added the tasks, we probably should have the ability to view the tasks. So to do that, I'm going to add the view tasks function here, and I'm going to pass my tasks to it. Then I'm going to go to my view tasks function. I'm going to take tasks as a parameter because in order to view the tasks, I need to know what they are, and then I'm going to print them out. So first things first, I'm just going to check if we do actually have any tasks. So I'm going to say if the length of, and actually, sorry, this needs to be len of tasks, and then tasks is equal to 0, then I'm going to print no tasks to display. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and display them. Now, one thing I'm going to do to make the code a little bit simpler is I'm going to say list tasks is equal to this, or actually, let's go task list. All right, and then I'm going to replace this with the task underscore list because I'm going to be using this list a few times. So I'm just going to reference what the list is. So now I don't need to keep writing tasks like that. Okay, so if the length of the task list is 0, then I'm going to say no tasks to display. Otherwise, I will display them. So to display them, I'm going to have a simple print, and I'm going to say and we'll go to do list like that, and then I will start printing them out. So similar to before, I'm going to say for I or IDX, comma task in enumerate, and I'm going to enumerate over my task list. Then I'm simply going to print out the tasks. So for my task, I have a key, which is a description, and another key, which is if it's complete. So I want to look at the key that tells me if the task is completed or not, so I can mark if the task is completed or if it's pending, right? So I'm going to say my status is equal to, and I'm going to have a string that says completed if the task complete. Otherwise, it's going to say, let's do this correctly, pending in a set of square brackets. Okay, so similar to what I showed you in the other projects, we say if this thing here is true, we grab this string. Otherwise, we grab this string. Okay, then what I can do is I can print out my task. So I can put an f string. I can put a set of braces. I can say I plus 1, so IDX plus 1, sorry, so that I get the number of the task. I'll say dot. Then I will reference the task description like this, okay? And I'm just going to make sure that my quotation marks are different here. So if you have double quotes for your f string, then use single quotes when you're referencing the key for the task. Otherwise, sometimes you can get some errors here. So again, single quotes inside of the string and double quotes to define the string. And then I am going to say the status, I'll just do a pipe and then status. Okay, so what this will do now is it will tell me the number of the task, it will say the description of the task, and then it will tell me whether the task is completed or whether it is pending. All right, so I'm curious to see if this is gonna work. So let's run the code. Let's go view tasks, and you can see that it says, hey, I have item list 1, and this is pending. And maybe I wanna add a bit more space. So actually I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna leave, and then I'm just gonna add a \n here. Let's just print. I'm just gonna print an empty line, just so that we have a bit more space when we view our tasks. Okay, so let me run this again. And now we will say view tasks, and it says your to-do list 1, item list 1, pending. Perfect, okay, and then I'm gonna quit. And actually, let's just test it one more time. Let's add another task. So let's go, make my bed or something, and task added, and let's view the tasks. And you can see now that we have 2 tasks. Sweet. Okay, let's get out of that. All right, so now that we have the ability to view the tasks, create the tasks, and save and load them, the last thing we need to do is mark them as complete. Now, in order to mark them as complete, we're gonna have to view what the tasks are. Then we're gonna have to ask the user to enter the task number, and based on the task number they input, we're gonna mark that as complete. Okay, so first things first, if they ask us to mark it as complete, we're just gonna print out the tasks. So we're gonna say view tasks, we're gonna take tasks as a parameter here, and we're gonna print them out, and then we're gonna ask the user to tell us the number of the task they want to mark as complete. So we're gonna say task underscore number is equal to input, and we're gonna say enter, like this, enter the task number to mark as complete. Okay, then we're gonna convert this, we're gonna dot strip this, and we're gonna convert this to a number because we need the integer. All right, now we're gonna make sure that they give us a valid number. So we're gonna say if, and we're gonna say 1 less than or equal to task number less than or equal to the length of our tasks. Then this means that it's valid. Otherwise, we're gonna print invalid task number. Okay, so if they gave us a valid number, what we need to do is mark the task as completed. So we're gonna say tasks at the, and sorry, this needs to be tasks at the task number -1, and then complete is equal to true. All right, I know that's a little bit of code. What I'm doing is I'm looking at my tasks, which remember is a dictionary. I'm grabbing the list of tasks, and then I'm referencing the individual task in there, which is whatever the number they gave me -1. The reason for that is when we print out the tasks, the first task we show as task number 1, but really its index in the list is 0. So we need to subtract 1 from whatever the user gives us. Then we access the complete key. Again, you can see that we have this inside of the task, and we just mark it as true. All right, then we're gonna say save tasks. We're gonna pass our tasks, and we're gonna print task, we go here, marked as complete. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's that. One thing I will do though, is I will just add a try and except here because it's possible that we could get an error. So I'm gonna put all of this inside of the try, and then I'm just gonna accept, and I'm gonna say print, enter a valid number. So if this gives us an error, this line right here, then rather than crashing the program, we're just gonna tell them, hey, this is invalid. So we'll say enter a valid number. All right, so that should be able to mark our task as completed now. Let's go ahead and run this and try. So we have our task, let's go complete task. And we got an issue say mark task complete, missing 1 required positional argument tasks. So the reason we got that error is because mark task complete doesn't pass the tasks which we need. So if I pass that here now, that should fix it. And if we come back up here and run again, and I go 3, now it shows us the list. It says enter the task number to mark as complete. Let's do 1, and then let's view our tasks. And you can see now that it says that this one is completed. Amazing. So that's pretty much it for our to-do list application. In fact, that's all of the code that I'm gonna write, but I will give you a challenge if you wanna continue here and ask you if you can make it so you can mark a task as incompleted and if you can delete tasks. Those are 2 operations you should be able to add here with the code that I've shown you so far. So give that a shot and let me know how that goes. Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap up this video. All of this code will be available from the link in the description. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.